Can you give me a sort of idea of who Gunnercooke are?
Absolutely, no problem at all. So we are one of the largest UK-based fee share firms in the legal space. We also have an international presence, particularly in the US and also in Germany and Austria, and a number of desks throughout Europe.
Okay, and I guess for people who maybe are not so familiar with a fee sharing law firm, would you just give us some sort of context on what a fee sharing law firm is, how it differs from a traditional law firm, and why someone might be attracted to joining a fee sharing law firm?
Yeah, no, it's a very relevant question. It's actually, I would say, the fastest growing and certainly most consistently growing model in the legal market. It's basically an alternative, I suppose, to the traditional salaried equity partner type of route that probably most people have in their minds when they first go into the law. And the real distinction here is that instead of having to wait for some future date where you might become an equity partner and be able to take out some of the benefits that you've spent years and years of your career building up, actually you're really taking those benefits at the point at which you're first earning them. So really, fee share is exactly, it does what it says on the tin, for want of a better phrase. You are, as a lawyer, taking the lion's share of your billings and your collections at the point at which you're actually earning them. So instead of having to wait for some later date and the traditional idea of, well, I've got to earn three times my salary,
Mhm.
it's not that at all. Actually, you take home 70, 75, even 90% in our model of your billings. So the best way to think about this is it's a model that rewards growth, but you
Mhm.
get those rewards upfront.
Okay, and I guess how does that benefit the lawyers apart from on the salary front? With regards to the team, etc., how it works internally.
That's a smart question because I mean, obviously, you could say quite easily when you look at those kinds of numbers, well, where do I sign?
Mm.
Because, the benefit from a compensation point of view seems fairly transparent, but it is the other things that actually make this model really, really
Mm.
attractive because I mean, I tend not to use the phrase work-life balance because I think we all know in
Mm.
if you're a driven
Buzzwords.
person, work-life balance is probably a misnomer. But work-life blend, to be able to
Mm.
actually control your own life, to be able to dictate and determine what it is that you really do, how you do it, the way that you show up every day. You might work till, I don't know, 9 o'clock one evening because you choose to do so, but then the next day you might go and, I don't know, attend your daughter's sports day because you can
Mm.
do. You're beholden to nobody but yourself and your own calendar and your own determination of what good looks like for you personally. So you set your own goals, you set your own fees, you set the way that you want to work. So providing you're doing things in an ethical, honorable way and doing everything properly, basically you're in control.
Right. Okay. And I guess from my side, what does that culture look like at Gunner Cook? Obviously you guys support, trying to get people to earn as much as possible, but what does the actual culture look like inside the firm?
I think that's actually probably the most important question you could have asked
Mm.
because, I mean, Daryl, who's our founder, Daryl Cook, he always says, anybody can copy a model, but you can't copy a culture. And the culture is actually the core differentiator here. It's one that is, I mean, perhaps counterintuitively, if you're looking at it outside and you don't really understand what it's like to be inside of this model, and particularly inside this firm, it is very collegiate, it's very collaborative, it's very supportive. It feels, I mean, it feels like a family, and I know that's a cliche, and but
Mm.
cliches are there for a reason. They describe something that we can tangibly get a grip of, and it is that sort of feeling of inclusion and feeling like you've found a place that you actually belong. And I mean, that's not just hyperbole. I mean, we have a real kind of sense of purpose
Mm.
at the heart of the firm. I mean, it's represented in the fact that we have a charitable foundation, which is not just like a box ticking CSR type of thing. It's actually, our foundation director has a seat at the leadership table. We've got our own CIC community interest company, which is designed to combat loneliness in our society, which is actually a bookshop in
Mm.
Manchester, which is a beautiful space if you're ever in Manchester. welcome you to come along and let me know,
Of
because
course,
I'll buy you a cup of coffee. There's also a really good cafe in there.
it's
And
important.
we support over 175 charities. We give an awful lot back
Mm,
so this is not just, we put our money where our mouth is, basically.
mm,
But on the other side of it, in terms of that collegiate collaborative piece, we aim to do about 150 events every year. And now, I'm not great at maths, but that's about three a week.
yeah, that's a lot.
No, don't get me wrong. Some of those events, are just like little simple online speed
Mm,
networking type of things, or even like little book clubs and things like that. But it brings people together, ranging from that kind of very basic thing right through to the big flagship event of the year, which
mm,
is our annual symposium that takes place in Oxford University every September, which is notionally like a celebration of our birthday. And in fact, it's our 15th birthday this year. So, it's a very inclusive, very collaborative, very collegiate environment.
And could I ask for people who are not familiar with Gunnercooke, because I have to admit, when I first came into recruitment, I wasn't so familiar with the brand itself. How many offices and what's your locations? And for people who maybe are based in Manchester or maybe based in London who might watch this, can you give us some sort of context into that?
You're testing my memory now, aren't you? Because we've got a lot. Okay, let me knock off the easy ones to start with.
Of course.
London, flagship office right there in the heart of the city, right next to Bank Station at One Cornhill.
Mm,
Fantastic address, lovely place to be. Great offices. We've got our Manchester, if you like, almost the place where all of our support team, who we call GC Trust for a very good reason.
mm,
So GC being the Gunnercooke part, but they're there to really support all of our partners to set them up for success. So all of our compliance and finance and
mm,
partner services and marketing and brand support, recruitment, all of those elements, those core elements that make the trains run on time, if you like, they're all based out of our Manchester office, which is here where I'm sitting right now on King Street in Manchester. We've got a brand new Leeds office that will be opening just next month, so that's very exciting. I'm looking forward to getting up there for the launch of that. We've got our office in Birmingham. We've got Edinburgh and Glasgow. So I think that's the UK ones knocked off. Then we've got Berlin, Munich, Hamburg, Dusseldorf, Frankfurt, Innsbruck, Vienna, New York, and Chicago. I think that's
right.
all of them. I think I've managed to remember all of them there.
Yeah. And I guess if you're a lawyer that's working, let's say in Manchester, and then you have to go and visit a relative 2 weeks in London, are they able to then work from the London office, without
Absolutely.
any issue? Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah, absolutely. That's all part of the fee share. I mean, Gunnercooke as the LLP obviously
mm,
retains a percentage of the billings, up to 30%, because at the lowest end of the billing spectrum, it's a 70-30 split.
mm,
But for within that 30% or 25% or 10%, depending on where you are in the range of your billings, we are basically funding the offices and all of those kinds of absolutely critical things. Effectively, when I first started with the firm about 4 years ago, I was actually coaching a number of the partners, because one of the things about moving into this kind of a model is you're moving from being quote unquote just a lawyer, and I don't want that to sound pejorative,
mm,
um, to being a lawyer and being a business person, having to think in terms of how do I win the business, how do I do the business, and how do I then also make sure that we're getting paid for the business, because you're setting your own fees and so forth. So a bit of business coaching, supporting the partners to be really successful in this environment is quite helpful. And one of the first partners I was coaching when I first came in, I remember said to me, well, this is great for me because it's a bit like being in a big firm, but without any of the politics.
mm.
And that really stuck with me. It was actually one of the things that resonated with me so much that I ended up actually staying with the firm, and then taking on a full-time salaried role with the firm. So it was almost like I was drinking the Kool-Aid before I
Mm.
started.
One of the questions I had for you with regards to, are there remote options for people if, maybe they live in an area that isn't covered by, one of the offices, or, do you recruit, people that are maybe in the sort of sticks, as such?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, This is one of those models which is, I mean, in America, because
Yeah.
the phrase fee share doesn't resonate quite so much over there, so they call it a distributed law firm, which
Okay.
is, the distributed refers to the workforce in some ways. So what you're talking about is effectively people who can work from anywhere.
Mm.
At a level, we're almost agnostic about where you plug your laptop in, providing you're doing all the right work for all, the right clients in the right jurisdiction. It's almost irrelevant to some extent where you're plugging your laptop in. So if you choose to come into the office once a week or once a day or once a month or never, that's entirely up to you as a partner.
Mm.
Wherever you do your best work, that's where you work. You kind of set your own working time in that way.
Okay, understood. And just to get some sort of context on, anyone that might watch this, what type of people do you recruit? With regards to what sort of following would, a candidate have to have for Gunnercooke to consider them? What are the sort of main areas that Gunnercooke look to recruit in?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're looking for really is a cultural and commercial fit and the
Hmm.
right sort of mindset. I think the fundamental thing first off is that if we get this right, and
Yeah.
I say this all the time to candidates, if we get this right, they're set up to succeed in such a way that they never feel the need to leave. And it should be, if we get it right, the last move they ever really need to make in their careers because ultimately they are happier, they're more successful than they could ever be in a traditional law firm, and actually they're able to do their best work on behalf of the right sorts of clients. So I think the first thing is mindset, because for all those things to be true, somebody's got to be prepared to back themselves.
Yep.
And that means that they've got to be prepared to take a perceived risk. And I'll call it a perceived risk than an
Mm.
actual risk, because if you're the right sort of caliber of partner, then you've got a client following, you've got
Those
clients who buy
relationships.
into you. I mean, ultimately, I spent 20, 25 years of my life client side. And when I used to instruct lawyers, I never instructed the firm, I instructed the lawyer. I
Yep.
instructed the person who made me feel safe,
Mm.
because this person was my trusted advisor, somebody who basically was going to keep me out of trouble, or if I didn't follow the advice and I got myself into trouble, they would get me out of it quite quickly.
Mm.
And ultimately, that's what a client wants. They want somebody who is that trusted advisor, that consigliere, that person who is the right hand person. And so you're looking for people who've got that following, but also in the mindset to say, okay, I'm prepared to back myself and take that perceived risk where I'm reaching for something that I think might be better, but in
Mm.
so doing, let go of something certain. And that something certain, obviously, is the regularity of a consistent salary that you're used to getting. Now, you
Mm.
very quickly wean yourself off that once you
Mm.
get to the idea of actually earning the kind of things you earn when you're in this model. But it's a leap of faith that you nonetheless have to take. And of course, lawyers, generally speaking, by training and often by disposition, are somewhat risk averse. So
Absolutely.
it's an important thing to do from our side that we actually spend our time in our journey nurturing them to help them to think more like a business person to set them up for that success. So mindset is the first thing. Cultural fit is the second thing, which obviously
Uh-huh.
means we want people who are going to be highly collegiate, highly collaborative, personable, ethical, honourable. They're driven by a certain level of personal purpose, and generally, frankly, they're nice people.
Mm.
I mean, I know that sounds a bit woolly, but actually, if you want to build a culture, then you should recruit
Yeah.
to the kind of behaviors and attitude and mindset that
You
kind of
want the
maintain
business to be.
and grow that culture. Thirdly, and this is the bit that you really asked me about, is the commercial fit. And
Mhm.
so you're looking at really it being a full service firm. We don't really do sort of stuff that I suppose, again, being somewhat pejorative, you might call high street stuff. We don't do residential, we don't do personal injury, we don't do any of those kinds of
Mhm.
high volume but low value kinds of stuff. Ultimately, we're looking for highly credible, experienced people in really corporate type of kind of practice areas. And we do quite a lot of niche stuff, TMT, fintech. We've got the largest crypto practice in all of Europe. So, we've
Okay.
got some really good, innovative, cutting edge kinds of areas.
Mhm.
But when you look at the sort of core of it, commercial real estate, employment law, but typically kind of favoring work on behalf of clients as much as sort of as in corporate clients as much as individual employees. Unless they're of high net worth individuals, that kind of thing. So you see the sorts of kind of areas we're typically focusing on: corporate M&A, litigation, to some extent, dispute resolution. You're looking into, I suppose, things like, to some extent, immigration,
Mhm.
those kinds of areas, intellectual property. Sorry, I can go on and on. There are a number of different practice areas. I think you get the idea there.
One of the interesting questions, and we actually addressed this off air, and I thought it was, quite an interesting aspect that, made Gunnercooke different to, I guess, your traditional law firm. Now collaborating inside the business. Now partners who refer business to other partners in law firms traditionally don't get rewarded for that. How is Gunnercooke structured that to make it, I guess, financially rewarding for the person that is bringing in the business, but maybe it isn't in their practice area?
Yeah, no, and I think that's again goes
Mm.
back to the fact that this is almost thinking more like a business person, thinking like only like a lawyer,
Yeah.
because now you're thinking about running your practice as a thing that helps you to design your life. So if you own a client relationship, if you have nurtured that client relationship over a number of years, and that client comes to you as the aforementioned trusted advisor,
Mm.
and then you say, okay, that is not my practice area, Mr. or Mrs. Client, but I can introduce you to this trusted person from within my firm who can deal with that, then obviously that person's going to do all of the work. You're not going to end up doing it, but you should still retain a percentage of the billing because you own the relationship. And
Mm.
to some extent, you're going to want to hold on to the relationship and nurture it and make sure that the deal is being done in the right way, the matter is being handled in the right way, and that you stay there in the background, almost not holding the reins, but and certainly not supervising because it's not your practice area,
Mm.
but doing something that will support the relationship and make sure that the deal lands really well. So for that, you would typically get a default of 10% of the overall billing. That can change by negotiation between the two partners that are involved. But nothing said. Assume 10% of the billing is going to come to you for relatively little other than just owning the relationship.
And that's definitely something that resonates with myself. I run a recruitment business, and winning the business is the hardest part. Um, and often, when we won business and then another recruiter in the team fills the role, they get all the sort of I guess accolades that come with that. But rewarding someone for bringing that business in is definitely the hardest part. So covering that off and setting, I guess, that difference between the sort of traditional law firms makes it beneficial to then collaborate with the team. And we've had it in the past where when I worked at other businesses where there wasn't much collaboration because there was not the incentive. A role would come in in a different part of the business, and they just wouldn't bother to forward it on. And that can cost a business substantial amount of money. And if you're incentivized to that go out, email a partner or email someone that maybe you haven't contacted before within the business, that definitely resonated with me, and I really like that aspect.
I couldn't agree more. And as I said, you and I have got at least some commonality in some of our
Mm.
background here, in that I've run a lot of business development teams, sales teams over the years. I've been somebody who's carried targets himself over the years as well. And fundamentally, the best kind of trusted advisor selling is not about closing a deal. It's about opening an account, which means it's a
Mm.
long-term relationship.
Mm.
And you are looking to build that and nurture that relationship, and the more things you can do to be the go-to person for your client, the deeper that relationship becomes and the more valuable it becomes. So if you have got a team of people around you who are not on your payroll, but
Mm.
fundamentally you know that they're there, that you can utilize their expertise, their specialism, and their frankly their very good customer
Mm.
service levels, because everybody here is on the proverbial eat what you kill model, which means that actually they've got a vested interest in doing a really good job on behalf of your clients.
Mm.
Then actually that's a virtuous circle. Everybody's got skin in the game, much as I hate that phrase, but actually, it really benefits everybody as well. I mean, let me tell you a very, very brief story, and I promise not to
Sure.
be too boring with it.
No.
One of the most successful partners who's come in the last couple of years, he's somebody who is relatively young. I mean, hugely impressive guy. I mean, very, very impressive guy. He came in from a relatively small boutique firm, but he was just growing his own client base exponentially
Mhm.
to the point where, never mind 3 times his salary, he was earning like 4, 5, 6 times his salary. And
Mhm.
it was just getting ridiculous. The thing that actually stopped him growing any further in the firm that he was in was exactly the thing I've just said. He didn't have people to refer his clients to because the
Mhm.
practice areas were not represented within his boutique firm. So when he looked around, he obviously looked at other traditional models and then he looked at us and thought, wow, there's the opportunity to be able to be as entrepreneurial as I actually am,
Mhm.
build my own team around myself to be able to exponentially grow my client base and do what I do, but do it, at a sort of with force multiplier of having my own team around me.
Mhm.
And I can still keep referring to all of these other practice areas and I can
Mhm.
grow and grow and grow. He was one of our top billing partners last year. Absolutely phenomenal.
Mm. And yeah, that's definitely testament to that referral scheme, and that was something that I really gravitated to because as you mentioned, we have similar backgrounds, and when you're in, and I hate to call recruitment a sales business because it is technically a sales business, but it's a high level sales business, but a lot of that aspect of referrals, fees, etc. That incentive piece really incentivizes people to take that action because if I'm referring to someone I don't know within the business, it's a lot of effort. I have to call them, etc. There's nothing in it for me.
Mm.
Then you will find that if you look at some of those large law firms, that it just doesn't happen.
No, exactly.
And people just either nothing in it for me, so I'm not going to bother doing that. It's my client, my possession, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. I guess from the growth of Gunnercooke. I remember Gunnercooke when it was quite early in the sort of development. It's grown exponentially. Can you give us some sort of insight into that growth and where you see Gunnercooke in the next 5, 10 years going forward as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a success story and continues to be one. So we started in 2010. As I mentioned earlier on, this is our 15th year now here in 2025. We're a teenager now. Don't worry, we're not slamming the bedroom door and doing all of the things that teenagers do. But yeah, it really sort of grew out of its northwest heartland. A significant proportion of our partner base is in London and in the city.
Mhm.
Um, Certainly, as far as the UK is concerned, probably about 2/3 of the partners there are in that sort of southeast area. We've got now entities in other jurisdictions, as I mentioned earlier on. 4 years ago, we launched in Germany,
Mhm.
and we are now at just around 50 partners in Germany and Austria. We launched 2.5 years ago in America, and we're at 20 partners and 2 offices in America. Very much a corporate M&A focused set of practices over in America. Very, very impressive growth there, and we're looking forward to even more growth there. I mean, it is by some considerable margin the largest legal market on the planet.
Of course.
So, dare I say, an area of opportunity.
Yeah, of course.
But you asked what the growth plans are, and I think it's fair to say any business wants to grow. And we are no exception in that regard. We have aspirations to at some stage be a top 50 global law firm. Certainly, we would want to be the number one fee share or distributed or law firm or whatever you want to call it
Mhm.
on the planet. But there's a reason behind that. It's purpose led. We want to be able to do that because that size, that scale, that profit generation
Mhm.
allows us to continue to do more good, more quickly, with more impact in every location where we are. Yeah, Daryl always talks about this idea of the square mile
Mhm.
around your office or your base of operations and having a positive impact on that square mile. Because if
Mhm.
every business did that, actually the world would be in a much, much better place. So this is, as I said earlier on, this is not just kind of a CSR box ticking thing. This is actually at the very heart of the concept of everything that we do, and that informs our culture and it informs our growth as well. So the growth strategy is a growth strategy with a purpose. It has this kind of Simon Sinek why that underpins it, if you see what I mean.
Mhm.
So yeah, we want to continue to grow. The aspiration is certainly to be a fully global law firm, and to basically continue with our strategy of what we call the golden triangle of 3 points being UK, Germany, or DACH region, and the US to start with. But then we will undoubtedly fill that in with some additional entities appropriately and strategically as time goes on.
What advice would you give someone who's maybe sitting on the fence about, joining a fee sharing model, or, Gunnercooke itself, who's maybe, not really sure, wants a little bit more information, but, has that sort of hesitance to, open up that conversation? What, reassurance would you give someone that's sitting in that sort of bracket?
Um, it's a very good question because it probably depends on where the hesitancy comes from.
Mhm.
If the hesitancy comes from personal circumstances and the fact that they're taking a risk not just on behalf of themselves, but also on behalf of their family and their dependents, maybe even on behalf of a team, if they're going to bring a team with them,
Mhm.
then obviously that's a slightly different answer to if they're simply doing it for themselves.
Mhm.
But I mean, really, because it's a nuanced discussion, it's one that I would say have a chat. The approach with us is that, as I've said earlier on, if we get this right, it's the last move you ever need to make. But for that reason, anybody who joins this model, it's about an open, no pressure conversation between two grown-ups
Mhm.
about whether or not this is even right for you. And it's not right for everybody. So when I have a first conversation with somebody, and I know this is true for anybody in our firm who has a first conversation with a potential candidate, it's exactly that. They're only a potential candidate.
Mhm.
We don't have any assumptions that they're, and we don't come to it with any agenda that says, hey, you're the next person we're going to try to pressure into joining, because that kind of hard pressure approach is good for one thing and one thing only, which is to send people running for the hills.
Mhm.
And quite rightly so,
Mhm.
because ultimately this is about helping you to self-discover
Mhm.
whether or not this is right for you and right for your circumstances. And there's so many times, when I speak to somebody and it is right for them culturally,
Mhm.
but it's not yet right for them commercially.
Mhm.
And it might be a year, 2 years, 3 years before it becomes right. In fact, we took on a guy year before last, not long after I first started in the firm, actually. And his initial conversations certainly predated me. It took him 5 years before he ever
Mhm.
joined. And don't get me wrong, when he joined, he was like, gosh, I wish I'd done this 5 years ago. But the timing wasn't right for him then.
Mhm.
It's right now. So I always say, look, we're not going anywhere. We'll still be here. We're ready for you when you're ready for us.
Mhm.
So it's a zero pressure conversation. So I think that that's the first thing to do is actually to pick up the phone or email, or, just send a little nudge through our website, or whatever you want to do. And just, contact me on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn about 10 times a day. So,
Mhm.
you'll get a response pretty quickly. If you wanted to email me, my email address is an awful lot shorter than my very long name. It's just my initials, mdh@gunnercooke.com. It's the easiest email address in the world. So, honestly, it's just the easiest thing to do is just have a chat.
Like, from a recruiter's point of view, and from my experience, I feel a lot of candidates psychologically, they don't cross that barrier. If they're not actively looking, but maybe they're curious, crossing that barrier of having that chat is the biggest obstacle in the whole process of moving someone
It
to a
is.
firm or a company. And those people that sit in that passive sort of bracket, but we'd like to know more information. I definitely recommend just having a chat and realizing that, if you're having a chat with another law firm, or, even a company,
Mm,
there's no commitment that you have to accept anything.
exactly.
It is a chat at the end of the day, and it's a two-way chat. And a lot of candidates don't really view it from that standpoint. It's they think, oh, I'm committed, and I need to interview, I need to, and they sort of do that panicking aspect of, I'm in the job market now, and it's not like that. Oh, most the best candidates I've ever placed have been ones that weren't looking in that specific moment.
Yeah.
Had a informal chat with myself, then all of a sudden they find themselves, there's a really good role there. I'm going to explore it, and for me, when I have those conversations on daily basis, it's just convincing someone to have a chat and initially with the team or the company or the law firm that we're recruiting for in that time, and that's definitely a psychological aspect that I would recommend anyone to sort of cross that barrier, see what it's about. If it's not for you, you don't have to accept anything, and
Absolutely.
you've
You
lost
know,
nothing, you've gained nothing.
well, I'd say you gain some insight.
Some
That's
insight, yeah.
the worst thing you ever walk away from one of these conversations is with a little bit of insight about the marketplace,
Mm,
maybe even some career advice, because that certainly happens a lot as well. And
mm,
it's a case of, let's just be grown-ups and just have a conversation about it, because ultimately, if we get this right, this is about starting a long-term business relationship, and any good quality relationship is predicated on two things: trust and reciprocity.
mm,
And you can't have trustworthiness unless you genuinely have the other person's best interests at heart. So my approach, and I know our business's approach, is always what's the right thing for the candidate. Because if it's not that, if it's not right for the candidate, it's not right for us. It can't
mm.
be. Because their best interests, serve our best interests as a firm. There is an alignment of interest. That's how this whole relationship thing works. Hence the reciprocity piece. So
Absolutely.
I think, if you approach it in that open mindset, then, and both parties are approaching it in that open mindset, I think it can be nothing other than a really healthy exchange.
Mm. No, absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. I guess what advice would you leave someone with after this podcast who's, maybe sort of curious to know a little bit more? Is there guides online if they don't want to have a conversation on, and just to learn a little bit more about how the structure works, that goes into a little bit more detail than us just speaking here, that they can, download from somewhere or,
Mhm.
request. Is there videos online, podcasts, on the website, etc., that you could, give them some sort of insight on?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you said video, because for me, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and at 30
Absolutely.
frames per second, that's a lot of pictures. That's a lot. I'm a huge fan of video. I think it tells you so much, because you get people's body language, you get tone of voice, you get. I mean, it's a bit like you and I chatting today. Now, this is a very normal, open conversation, not
Mm,
scripted. It's just two guys talking. And I think
absolutely.
that speaks 1,000 words. I really do. So it's
Mm.
probably a lot more than 1,000, because I'm quite verbose. If you go on YouTube and you type in Gunner Cook, we've got like a Gunner Cook channel on there, and there are so many videos on there, ranging from like individual pieces to camera from partners talking about, like insights from their practice areas, but also then there's a lot of cultural stuff. You can see actually videos from our symposia, last year's symposium summary and all the rest of it. There's some really good stuff on there, and I think actually those videos probably go more to painting a really good picture, or pictures,
Mm.
of what it's like to be inside this model. You can disappear down a bit of a rabbit hole, like you always can do on YouTube. So, you have been warned. But go on the website, download the brochure from the website, have a look at the various bits of information that are on there. Send a contact form through to us, and we'll just send you some information. Look, I mean, this is 2025. There's so much information out there online.
Mm.
Everything's a click away, isn't it? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
And of course, there is always the old-fashioned thing of picking up the phone.
Mm.
Always happy to talk.
Absolutely. And I guess just to sort of end the sort of podcast, I want to ask you some quick fire questions to give
Right. I'm
some
ready.
yeah, some quick fire questions to give some final context and conclusions. So one word to describe Gunnar Cook:
Innovation.
innovation. Biggest misconception that you've come across around fee sharing models?
Biggest misconception is that it's silos and it's people kind of working on their kitchen tables,
Hmm. Most
which is not.
exciting, most exciting part about your job?
Talking to people. I mean,
Okay.
get listen. Genuinely, for me, that's what I feel like I was put on this planet to do, is to help people to make meaningful changes in their lives. It's why I
Hmm.
became a business coach. It's why I ended up doing what I'm doing now. It is a incredible privilege to help people on, cliche again, but a journey to change
Hmm.
from where they are to actually something where they turn around to me afterwards and they say, "Thank you." That's
Mm,
amazing. My life has changed for the better. I couldn't even imagine this beforehand. This is way better than I even thought it was going to be. I'm working with the clients I want to work with, doing the kind of work I want to do. I'm actually living more, sleeping better. My blood pressure is down. I'm earning more. Basically, I get to be on people's Christmas card list forevermore. It's great.
mm. No, completely agree. Um, I guess one thing that every lawyer should know before joining Gunner Cook.
There's no get rich quick schemes in this world.
Mhm.
If you're going to do anything that is worth doing, it takes effort. But if you've got a sense of pride in what you do, if you're conscientious about what you do, if you are good at what you do, and if you know that you genuinely add value to your clients, then coming in with this kind of a model, having an entrepreneurial mindset and backing yourself could well be the best thing you ever do. Might not necessarily be the easiest thing you'll ever do, but it's certainly one of the best.
And that's the advice I would give as well. Anyone that's thinking about joining, a fee sharing model. If you're a high performer in your current role, there's a high chance that you're going to be a high performer, at Gunner Cook and earn a lot more. And I think, 9 times out of 10, when I started GA Group, which is my recruitment firm, backing myself was the hardest part, and the biggest obstacle was, do I have 100% trust that I can go out, win business, put food on my table, and that's the biggest, I guess, obstacle. And if you really back yourself and trust your ability, I think Gunner could be a really solid home for you in the future. And I would definitely recommend either reaching out to myself or the team to find out more information. And I think there's one of the things I like about Gunner Cook, it's not a pressure environment in the sense of, we must join, we hire anyone. It's very much a firm that really is selective of who they hire, because they're looking for, the culture fit, number one, but number two, also, expanding their business and building their business with the right people. And, when you have a solid foundation in any business of the right people, you will be able to build blocks upon blocks and build a business. And I think, the people that you hire are fundamental to the growth of the business. And the fact that, Gunner Cook has grown so much, can only be testament to their hiring, which, goes hand in hand with your job. So you must be doing a very good job. But generally speaking, from any business, that's, the key criteria in growth is the people. And, I think that's one of the sort of leaving factors that I'll leave to this podcast is that, many firms that we work with, they're not so interested in the people. They're interested so much more in the sort of bottom line. I think, Gunner Cook has shown me, both, they're a business and every business is going to be commercial, but, being fundamental with who you hire and the types of people you hire is also important for that next growth, because, Gunner Cook looks to recruit people who are, in it for the long term rather than, come for 1 year, do well and then leave. And, that's, fundamental in growth is retaining people. And I think, having had a look at a lot of the people that, Gunner Cook has recruited, a lot of them have stayed for a long period of time. And that's testament to the environment that they're in. So, anyone that is sitting on the fence, have that conversation.
Without a doubt. Thank you
Mm.
very much indeed. Really
You're
enjoyed the
welcome.
conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I'll leave the contact details for Matthew in the comments.
Excellent. Fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing it.